So from here, let me take you back 30 years to the year 1990. The year 1990, why would I go back to the year 1990? What was so special about the year 1990? One, I had my second child, my younger daughter, in 1990, the May of 1990. And the July of 1990, I happened to come to India for a holiday. The date was 15th of July. And then more than 48 hours later, I landed into Chennai. Why that 48 hours? The journey started in such a way I should have been forewarned, but I wasn't. The flight made an emergency landing in Bahrain, was stuck there for 24 hours, and with my two toddler children, one infant and one toddler to be precise, I came to Chennai. 15 days down the line, my husband was supposed to join me. It was Raksha Bandhan on the 4th of August that year. 2nd of August, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait with a ragtag army of 100,000 soldiers, some 250 tanks, rolled at 2 a.m. into Kuwait. Why should I be worried about Kuwait? Because I lived in Kuwait. And 2nd August was the last day when my husband communicated with me on the phone. I'm talking about an era where there were no mobiles, no WhatsApps, not much of internet, no Google. Can you imagine? No Google. How many of you can imagine a life without Google? Raise your hands up if you can imagine a life without Google. I can only see one hand somewhere back telling me that they can imagine a life without Google. I've been asked this numerous number of times. What did you do when you didn't have Google? And my answer would be, we read. We went to the library, we researched, and we read. Let me coming back to the story. I spoke to my husband, and my husband said, I was woken up by anti-aircraft guns, fire, paratroopers dropping into the city, and I could see them from my windows. And in the morning, when daylight happened, the streets were filled with soldiers, Iraqi soldiers, who barely had any uniforms. They were almost maybe 16, 17 years old, and it looked like a ragtag army. And I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think I had any words. Whatever plans, dreams, whatever was there in my head, it just vanished. And the only thought that remained was, my husband should survive this and come back and be united with us. Everything else we could handle, we would face it. But right now, the priority was that he should come back safe and sound. And believe me, that was the thought that occupied almost the forefront of this area, every single waking moment. I don't think I slept much till I was united with him. I don't think I've thought of much till I was united with him, because I couldn't envision a future with my two young children living without him. 15 days down the line, the then Foreign Minister of India, Mr. I.K. Gujral, visited Baghdad. And if you go back into time, you will see that he was hugged by Saddam Hussein. This was a perpetrator of violence, and he hugged our Indian Foreign Minister. It was unbelievable. It sent shockwaves down the world community. How could I.K. Gujral have allowed Saddam Hussein to hug him? But I think in his position, he couldn't have refused. And I think that was one of the saving graces, that Indian government was able to take out 170,000 refugees in 1,488 Air India operated flights from Amman and other places and bring them back to India. And that established a Guinness World Record. I think you have to give it to the Indian government for having really come up with an operation like that, an ingenious operation, where nobody was asked to pay anything. If they couldn't pay, they were just ferried back. If they didn't have passports, temporary papers were made. Most of the times we are throwing brickbats at the government, but I stand testimony to the fact that one of my husband was airlifted and brought to India. Anyway, I jumped a little ahead. And so as I was introduced, you were told I'm a jeweler by profession. We had a jewelry store in Kuwait, which my husband and I had founded. And once the invasion took place, we didn't know what was happening. How were we going to safeguard that stock? How are we going to get that gold out of that war-torn zone? The 5th of August, my husband did a recce with a friend of his. And what he did was, he went around to check out the routes which are not being manned by the army and charted out a route to get to the store. Contacted his employees. The internal telephone lines, the landlines, the so-called landlines of that time were working. The connection with the rest of the world had been cut. You could not converse with anybody in Kuwait from any other part of the world. There was no news. There was a news blanket. You didn't know what was happening. So in his words, he contacted his employees and he asked them to accumulate. The next day, they took about 20 empty pillowcases from home. And around the time when it is prayer time, roughly about 12 p.m. in the afternoon, when everybody just leaves everything and goes for their namaz, they went into the store, disarmed the burglar alarm within a span of 30 seconds. The shutters, usually what you see as far as stores are concerned in India, are like this. Our shutter used to move like this, very silent. We used to have a shutter outside which used to move horizontally. And they closed the shutter. And within the span of 20 to 25 minutes, they just dumped all the jewelry into those pillowcases, tied them roughly like sacks, as if they were thieves instead of being the owners of the store. One person was out in the lookout. They loaded the car with those roughly bound sacks of gold jewelry and they left for home. And home had no lockers because there was no, fear of theft in Kuwait. You could hand over your key to your maid and she could come and clean behind you, and nobody ever locked anything over there. So the only place he could think of, there was a loft on top of our bathroom. He dumped all the sacks of jewelry into the bathroom loft. One part done. Now how do we get it out of here? The next day, he realized that there was a part of that stock which was left behind in a couple of drawers. And then what happens? He says, let's go and retrieve the other, whatever we've left behind. And once he reaches the store, it was a sight to behold. The whole store was ransacked. There was nothing left. It was shelled, and out of anger because they didn't find anything inside, it was completely gutted. So what was it that prompted him to do something one day previous? It was courage. It was his gut. It was his instinct telling him to do and not just sit on a decision. So underplay the gravity of the situation and take action, and you will overcome. That is what is the learning. Once the stock is home and IK Gujral comes back from India, from Kuwait, we get a letter, courtesy IK Gujral. He carried letters from all the Indians who wanted to send letters to their relatives in India. I get a letter addressed to me and it says, with best compliments of IK Gujral. I open the letter, and when I read the letter, I'm able to gauge that my husband has done something. It's a very guarded letter. The words are extremely cagey and guarded. But knowing him, I understand that he has done something and we need to salvage that. So I get into action. All of 28 years old, what do? I have a baby. I have a toddler. I come to Delhi, where incidentally I'm originally from Delhi University, and I grew up in Delhi. And I approach the Ministry of External Affairs every day. Like you go to the temple, I go to the Ministry of External Affairs and say, hello, my husband is a jeweler. He has this many kilos of gold and he wants to come out of there. Can't you do something about it? Can't you have your ambassador take over so that he's free to come back? Because I know he won't come back without the goods that he's holding. Every day it's the same story. It's bureaucracy. It moves at its own pace. Finally, one day they say, yes, we understand. When I convince them that it is not just my husband. If you do it for my husband, you'll be doing for 100 and other jewelers. And it is all Indian wealth. It does not belong to Kuwait. It does not belong to Saddam Hussein. It belongs to India. Eventually, I am told that, yes, the ambassador in Baghdad will take possession of the gold from my husband. And the twist in the tale is that how do I communicate this to my husband? I'm doing this on this end and we are not able to communicate at all. So what do? Eventually, he would drive 652 kilometers one way from Kuwait to Baghdad to be able to speak to me. And this was an operator-connected call. Some days it would connect, and some days he would drive back that 652 kilometers in the same day because he couldn't connect. One day when he connected, I told him, the ambassador is willing to take over your goods. He went and met the ambassador the very same day. And he said, yes, you can definitely leave your gold behind here. It's perfectly fine. We've got permission from the Ministry of External Affairs and you can just go ahead and deposit. I said, sir, would you be willing to give me a receipt? He said, what receipt? I said, sir, but I'm depositing a bag full of gold with you. He said, there is the cupboard, a Godrej cupboard. You can just put whatever you have to put over there and you can leave. You're free to leave. He said, but sir, can you just give me a receipt which says, I deposited a bag full of gold. I'm not even asking for the weight. He said, sorry, I can't do that. My husband just walked out. He said, this is not a practical solution and I can't do this. Okay, we're back to square one. There was a certain setup that was operating for India, certain influential citizens and a citizen help group which was coordinating relief operations from Kuwait to India via Amman, via other places. By greasing a few palms, he was able to secure a place for himself on one of these. But as a single man with no family with him over there, he was one of the last priorities. It's always the women and the children and the families who are always given first priority when you are a refugee. It's worldwide policy. He was the last priority. So he had to grease a few palms. And while he was doing this, he structured a plan. And what was that plan? That plan was to sit in the bathroom of his house with a goldsmith using 18 cylinders of gas, melting down that huge volume of gold jewelry into crude bars. Jewelry, my friends, has volume. if he had to transport it out of the country, he had to condense it. And condense it in such a form that it was carryable. Let me tell you one more fact here. Gold weighs 19.3 times more than water. If you hold 1 liter of water in your hand and 1 kilo of gold in the other, the gold weighs 19.3 times heavier. So he condenses it, he melts it into crude bars and stores it away into the loft of his home. And one of the days when he decides to go to Baghdad to do a recce, to find another way of coming out of the country, he gets a call from the coordinator. And one of the neighbors picks it up. And he says, where is Naresh? He said, he's not here. He's gone to Baghdad. He said, I have booked him on a ship which was leaving directly from Kuwait. He said, he's not there. He said, he's not there, but I did tell him to stick around. And now he's lost the chance. I'm sorry, he'll not be able to go. But as luck would have it, the lady who picked up the phone, who was a friend of mine, my neighbor and friend, she requested this gentleman and said, look, since he's not there, there are 2 ladies in our group. Can we both board that ship? One of them was my sister-in-law, who was expecting her first baby. And the other one was this friend of mine. And both of them got to travel on that ship, the first refugee ship that left Kuwait. It came as a ship which came to give supplies to Kuwait for relief, and it was filled with refugees and sent back. When my husband got back, he realized he had missed his chance to leave the country. And then he was told if he did not stick around, he would not be able to go. By the time we are in October, August is gone, September is gone, and we are in October. My husband is still not back. I still don't know what's actually happening on ground. And on the 4th of October, I think the words are indelibly printed in my heart, soul, mind, everywhere. This is a ship-to-shore call from ship MV Akbar. And Mr. Naresh Chetan would like to speak to Sangeeta Chetan. My husband had boarded a ship which was sent with relief supplies to Iraq. And he was sitting in the cargo hold. And he managed to convince the captain of the ship by paying him some money to make him have a conversation with me from that ship. And I spoke to him. The first emotion was disbelief. The second was a whoop of joy that finally he was coming back. And how did he manage that? Now, he managed that, but there was another hurdle. India has very tough customs rules. How is he going to enter India with that much quantity of gold? What he has managed to salvage, will he want to give away at the customs in India? And the rule was, you landed with the ship in Dubai, you docked with the ship in Dubai, and you had aircrafts which were waiting there on standby to take you to India. But again, the wheeler dealer that he is, the strategist that he is, he managed to reach out to another friend of his from Dubai, and he convinced him to get him off that ship. And he managed, I think he was the only person who got out of that ship into Dubai. He put the gold in a locker, took a flight from Dubai to Mumbai, and I met him on the 5th of October in Mumbai. And Why do I remember this date? Because 5th of October is his birthday. And believe it or not, by 25th of October, we were already in Coimbatore. We had shortlisted a small office. We had rented an apartment. And by December 1990, we have moved lock, stock, and barrel to Coimbatore and restarted our career from scratch. So let me tell you, the magic can't leave you. The magic is you.